in a league of very big, scary men, John Hannah was a man amongst men.
John was, one of the meaner guys to play against.
Before we had Larry Allen benching 700 pounds, before Quentin Nelson was bulldozing grown men on Sunday nights, there was John Hannah, a man who didn't just block defenders, he broke them.
The number 2 New England Patriot of all time, John Hannah.
In an era when most linemen looked like beer league brawlers, Hannah was an athletic anomaly. Quick as a tight end, built like a tank, and meaner than a linebacker with something to prove. He spent 13 seasons with the New England Patriots from 1973 to 1985, and by the time he retired, people weren't just calling him great, they were calling him the greatest offensive lineman who ever lived. But how good was John Hannah actually? Was he truly the standard every guard since has been chasing, or has time turned his legend into myth? To answer that, we need to go back to a time when offensive line play wasn't about highlights, but about fear. At 6 feet 2 inches and 265 pounds, Hannah wasn't enormous by today's standards. But in the 1970s, when most guards hovered around 240, he was a monster. The difference was how he carried it. His wrestling background gave him elite balance, core strength, and hand placement. His legs were built from years of track and field, short, explosive, and relentless. He could pull across the line and hit a linebacker square in the open field before the running back had cleared the handoff. He could reset his base and absorb a bull rush like a brick wall. Teammates said you could hear his blocks, that sharp, violent crack when helmets met shoulder pads. Opponents described it like getting hit by a dump truck that could run a 4.8. And this wasn't just raw strength. Hannah trained differently. He lifted year-round, obsessed over leverage, and conditioned like a defensive end. In the 1970s, that kind of dedication was unheard of. He wasn't trying to be bigger, he was trying to be perfect. Born in 1951 in Canton, Georgia, Hannah grew up surrounded by football culture. At Baylor School in Tennessee, he starred in football, track, and wrestling, even winning a national prep wrestling championship. At the University of Alabama, under the legendary Bear Bryant, Hannah became a 2-time All-American and a foundational piece of Bryant's hard-nosed line play. The Patriots drafted him 4th overall in 1973, the highest pick for a guard in years. New England wasn't a powerhouse then, but they were about to build one around him. Hannah made an immediate impact, starting 13 games as a rookie before a leg injury cut the season short. But by 1975, he was already one of the best run blockers in the AFC. The real breakout came in 1978. That year, the Patriots, behind an offensive line anchored by Hannah, rushed for 3,165 yards, an NFL single-season record that stood for decades. That number isn't just a stat, it's proof of dominance. And when you watch the film, it was obvious who the engine was. Hannah's pulls, traps, and reach blocks turned defensive tackles into traffic cones. The Patriots' ground game wasn't creative, it was simple. They lined up, ran behind 73, and dared you to stop it. No one could. From 1976 through 1985, John Hannah was the definition of elite consistency. He was named first-team All-Pro 10 times in 10 years. He made 9 Pro Bowls. And across 13 seasons, he missed just 5 games due to injury. That kind of dominance for that long at one of the NFL's most physically brutal positions, it's nearly unheard of. Stat sheets don't do linemen justice, but team production does. During his prime, New England consistently ranked near the top of the league in rushing efficiency, and Hannah's side of the line was where the yards lived. Scouts graded him with near-perfect film sessions, coaches used him as teaching tape, and even fellow linemen, the guys who never hand out compliments, called him untouchable. He was named to both the 1970s and 1980s All-Decade teams. Later, the NFL's 75th and 100th anniversary all-time teams. There are maybe a dozen offensive linemen in the history of the game who can claim even half that. By the early 80s, John Hannah was a myth in real time. Sports Illustrated called him the best offensive lineman of all time while he was still playing. Patriots fans adored him, but linemen don't get highlight reels. You had to feel his impact. Running backs said they'd rather follow Hannah than any fullback. His number 73 was eventually retired, the first player in Patriots history to get that honor. And when he entered the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1991, he became New England's first true legend. If you're enjoying this deep dive so far, do me a quick favor. Take a second to hit subscribe. It's free, it helps the channel a ton, and it tells me you want more breakdowns like this one. All right, back to Hannah. Some critics argue Hanna benefited from a run-heavy era, that the 70s and 80s were easier on guards because defensive schemes were simpler. But context matters. In that era, guards had to block in tighter spaces against stronger fronts, and often without motion or spacing to help. It was trench warfare, raw strength, raw technique. And Hanna didn't just survive in that environment, he thrived. He excelled in both pass and run protection, leading a line that shattered records. Even advanced metrics like team rushing EPA, estimated from modern adjustments, put those Patriots teams among the top 1% of ground units ever. He wasn't a product of the 70s. He was the prototype for the modern NFL guard. In 1977, Hanna briefly held out over contract disputes, a rare move for a lineman at the time, but when he returned, he didn't miss a beat. From 1978 on, he stacked All-Pro after All-Pro. He dealt with nagging knee issues later in his career, but continued to dominate into his mid-30s. His final 2 seasons, 1984 and 1985, he was still a first-team All-Pro, proof that even with mileage, he was better than almost everyone else. In 1985, the Patriots, long considered AFC afterthoughts, made a surprise Super Bowl run. Hanna, now 34 years old, was still anchoring the left side of the line. He finally got his Super Bowl appearance in 20 against the Chicago Bears' legendary 46 defense. Even in that loss, his personal matchup with Dan Hampton and Steve McMichael was one of the few bright spots. And after 13 seasons, 183 starts, and 10 years as the best in the world, Hanna retired on his own terms. So how do we measure greatness for a player like John Hanna? You can't count his touchdowns, he didn't score any. You can't total his tackles, he wasn't allowed to make them. You measure it in dominance, respect, and lasting influence. 10 straight first-team All-Pros, 9 Pro Bowls, 2 All-Decade teams, the NFL's 75th and 100th anniversary all-time teams, the only player in Patriots history who can say he was their first true superstar. He set the template for every great guard that followed, from Will Shields to Steve Hutchinson to Larry Allen. They all studied 73's film. John Hanna wasn't just great, he was defining. He was the first guard to be treated like a franchise player, the first lineman whose name every fan in the stadium actually knew. He combined the power of a heavyweight, the technique of a wrestler, and the work ethic of a Marine. If you made a Mount Rushmore of offensive linemen, Anthony Munoz, Larry Allen, Jonathan Ogden, you'd carve John Hanna's face first. John Hanna wasn't just good. He was the gold standard, the blueprint every dominant guard since has been compared to.